We have here in the Gospel a strong reminder of the power that we have before us every time we come into this sacred presence, and indeed invite that presence to come into our midst. With regard to the power of Christ, all the elements acknowledge him. It was the case in the finding of the child there by the Magi. Even stars were behaving according to the will of the Creator. But it is true also in the outworking of his power in our life. It's something to be borne in mind as we start a new year. We call it providence. 2 words, pro, before, and video, to see. We unpack time, and it is all a surprise to us. But the vision of God has no surprises. He calmly and serenely sees all. He also sees all that might be. For at each point in time, something can intervene and interfere and make time go a different way. Moments which have effects on other moments. And it's important to bear that in mind before we make blunders. Because when we look back over a past year, sometimes we think to ourselves, I wish I hadn't made that mistake, or this would not have happened. So before we make further mistakes, it's important that we hand over the control of our time and our will to the one that gave us the power to be. Now, having said that, in our Catholic faith there are direct interventions. We are used to that intervention by the very fact that we are on a daily basis involving all the power of the Blessed Trinity in our worship. There is a fundamental, ontological, profound difference between our worship and life as Catholics and that which has come from us in the reforms, so-called, because they only have prayer and the word, essentially. Whereas we have all the time the complete action of the Blessed Trinity right next to us and before us. Now, therefore, it is not so much of a surprise when we see, for instance, prayer being directly answered. Why should it be? We have many promises that if we are sincere and united in our prayer, then we are being heard. Hence it is that there is power here right now, because we are all intensely praying together for an intention. The Lord therefore will honour his promise. And then, when it comes to specific praying for people, for instance, we might be praying in a prayer group for healing, that same power is there, and things do happen. They also happen on an individual basis when we claim promises, e.g. the use of blessed objects like scapulars. We pull on the promises. In Welsh there is an old classical phrase which was used in the chapels. It was gafael yn rhaffau yr addewidion, getting hold of, grasping the ropes of the promises. You in the north will have seen perhaps something of that intensity of prayer in your Protestant brethren. They do actually pray with sincerity and intensity sometimes, and it's important that we don't neglect that in our own prayer. It should be not less fervent but more. The danger is that when we're using prayers repeated and composed by someone else, sometimes we can be distracted. Therefore we need to be aware that prayer, for it to be serious, has to be engaged, not just be, as it were, said in automatic pilot. Now, therefore, there are times in our life when genuinely we do cry out. E.g., on the way back now to the north, you may skid. What will you do? Immediately you start crying out in prayer, with genuine in prayer, not in that moment any way distracted. It's really from the heart. And so it is that many people have, over the centuries, at that point found that yes, things would genuinely happen. I've spoken to more than one person who has been involved in an accident and something has happened, even actually quite dramatic, like seeing for a fraction Our Blessed Lady appearing or something of that nature, and things then being rescued. And we know also that in accidents genuinely there is an angelic intervention quite often. One can actually see some of them caught on video on YouTube, genuinely miraculous interventions from angelic sources. I was reading once or twice things that happened on an individual level where genuinely this power that we see in the miracle of walking on the water and calming the storm was repeated in some shape or form. Some years ago there was a good lady travelling, in those days it was very slow and laborious, by boat from Ireland to America. And they were at one point out there in the Atlantic caught in heavy storms, and it was quite serious, and it wasn't at all clear that they would survive. She had been on pilgrimage to Knock and had had the good Catholic instinct. In those days it was possible, before they protected it quite as they have now, to scratch a little bit of the gable end and put it in her pocket. So she had this, and she had the instinct at that point to cast her burden on Our Blessed Lady. So this little treasure of hers she gambled with and threw it with faith and prayer into the waves, and immediately they stilled and they were saved. Another occasion was when there were Catholics and Protestants, Irish and American, on a vessel, and they were in similar dire straits. And this gentleman had a blessed scapula of Mount Carmel, and again it was a very serious situation with the waves roaring, and he had the instinct, like that good woman quite separately years previously, to throw that into the water. And the same thing happened. But this time something else happened too. There happened to be on that same vessel, and in quite turmoil spiritually and emotionally, this Reverend Presbyterian, and he observed this action. And when things had calmed down, he made a point of going to this good man and asking what he had done. And these Presbyterians can be by nature fairly anti-Catholic, but when he heard, he calmed down considerably and eventually, yes, asked for instruction to the Catholic faith. So that is the power that we have, and we mustn't be surprised if it works. I remember one time, even a student, it was there in Bangor, this lassie who actually became a Catholic at that time. She had been whatever she had been, and she had this awareness the Catholic Church had more, and she was coming towards us, and she asked for instruction and reception into the church and confirmation, all of which was given to her by the chaplain eventually when we were there in Bangor. But this lassie, brilliant though she was, very unusual for a young girl, had a problem. It was serious pain. It was quite inexplicable at that age, but she had arthritic pains at the joints, and it was causing her quite a lot of bother. So she came up to me one day and asked if we could pray about it together. And so we went for the Blessed Sacrament, and we genuinely, in that mode of intense prayer, not the distracted sort, did pull on the ropes of the promises. And we invoked our local saint, St. John Roberts, who was, there he is actually in that picture. He was caught in his robes in 1610. He just got the last gospel, and they banged at the door, "Open up in the name of the King." So because he was still there in his robes, they couldn't hide the fact, and he was taken away and hanged, drawn and quartered at Tyburn, martyred for the priesthood. Well, we have a major relic of him there near where we live, and we actually invoked him there for this healing. And the next morning, I'd forgotten all about the thing, that she came up to me and she said, "I couldn't believe it. So we're surprised, but why should we be? We're pulling on God, and He takes seriously those who take Him seriously. So in our Catholic faith, we must not be afraid to pull hard and take God at His word. And when He sees us serious, He'll do the same. Frankincense to offer have I, incense songs and lighting high, prayer and praising, all are raising, worshiping God most high. O star, wonder, star of night, star with royal beauty bright, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to thy perfect